Bringing a video game to market is a tremendous feat even under the most harmonious of circumstances, and it's safe to say that no game hits the shelves exactly the way that the developers envisioned it. The iterative process of game dev often results in features being added late in the day, or perhaps more commonly, being removed when the team realises they're not quite working. These 10 games, all of them hugely successful and acclaimed in their own right, nevertheless plan to bring even more ingenuity to the table with these brilliantly creative ideas which sadly never came to fruition. In some cases they were left on the cutting room floor due to time constraints or the sheer technical difficulty of implementing them, while in other instances it was a pure storytelling decision or the simple belief that the end result wasn't as fun or interesting as they had hoped. Even so, these inspired storylines, modes and mechanics would have added another fascinating wrinkle to these already terrific games. I am Kirsten from WhatCulture Gaming, and these are 10 incredible ditched video game ideas. Number 10. The Psycho Mantis Mask, Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty. The Metal Gear Solid franchise is so overflowing with creative gameplay that it's no surprise that Hideo Kojima can't realise every single creative idea that's in his head. But perhaps his most brilliantly off-the-wall concept was one from Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty, where players would be able to find a special mask modelled after the previous game's iconic boss, Psycho Mantis. Wearing the mask would allow protagonist Raiden the ability to read the thoughts of other characters during gameplay and even cutscenes, which, given Kojima's insane attention to detail, naturally had a ton of potential, both comedic and creepy. According to Kojima himself, players would be able to use the mask on Iroquois Pliskin early in the game and deduce that his identity was Solid Snake hours before it was actually revealed. Sadly, the Mantis mask never made it into the final game due to unspecified reasons, but given the amount of complexity involved, it was probable that it was due to time constraints. Number 9. Infected Animals, The Last of Us. Shortly before the release of The Last of Us, Naughty Dog came out with some of the things that had been cut from the game. Most noticeably was the fact that animals would have been infected with the cordyceps brain infection. In particular, a set piece in the game was going to have Joel be attacked and chased around by an infected elephant, which would have had fungal growths on its legs and a giant mushroom growing out of its head. The decision was ultimately made to take infected animals out, leading to that wonderfully serene moment late in the game where Joel and Ellie encounter a herd of giraffes. It remains to be seen if The Last of Us 2 will incorporate infected animals, as all we have seen in gameplay so far is Ellie being attacked by guard dogs, but it remains to be seen if those guard dogs are infected with the cordyceps virus. Number 8. Play as all the James Bonds, GoldenEye 007. GoldenEye 007 is one of the best first-person shooters ever, and for damn good reason, but it was very nearly even better, if not for a pesky licensing issue. Originally, developers Rare planned to include the option to play as the Sean Connery, Roger Moore and Timothy Dalton James Bonds in the game's multiplayer suite. However, for various reasons widely accepted to pertain to likeness rights problems, Rare weren't able or allowed to include the feature in the game. Though the image files for Connery, Moore and Dalton are in the game files and were found by the modding community, unfortunately it seems like we will never get the all-Bond battle royale that the fans were hoping for. Number 7. Holding Your Breath, Resident Evil 7. Resident Evil 7 went through various iterations before Capcom decided to reinvent it into a first-person shooter with a bone-chilling VR functionality. A feature which was added during development but was ultimately removed was the ability for players to hold their breath in order to quietly sneak past the game's enemies undetected. It's easy to see how incredibly effective this could have been for VR users in particular, given the already intensely stressful nature of the game's incredible VR implementation. Executive producer Jun Takeuchi explained that the feature was removed during testing for a very specific reason. It was a really fun idea, but we found people tended to tense up and hold their breath for real, making it very tiring to play. It was a great idea on paper, but we ditched it because we thought that doing that for 15 hours would give people hypoxia. If Resident Evil 7 in VR isn't already a panic-inducing experience, then this would have absolutely clinched it. Number 6. Shoot footholds in the environment, Uncharted 4: A Thief's End. Uncharted 4's A Thief's End went through countless creative changes during development and had 8 months' work scrapped in one fell swoop due to a changeover in directorial personnel. One of the boldest and most controversial ditched ideas was to have Nathan Drake be unarmed for the first half of the game in order to combat criticisms about his bloodthirsty nature. However, there's a single smaller proposed gameplay concept which clearly should have made the cut. An early suggestion was for Drake to be able to shoot holes in the game's hub-like environments, which he could then use as footholds to find his own path across. It's a brilliant idea, albeit one so complex in its ambition that it's easy to see why a game as mostly linear as Uncharted couldn't really make it work. This would have been an absolute headache from a development point of view, as amazing as it would have been. Number 5. Co-op multiplayer. Super Mario 64. Super Mario 64 is one of the best games of all time, a pitch-perfect game design which brought everyone's favourite Italian plumber into the 3D era. Believe it or not, Nintendo actually had an even bolder and more impressive vision for the game, with the team initially attempting to include a split-screen co-op multiplayer mode where a second player would control Luigi. The idea was for players to start off at separate points in the castle, through platforming and puzzling help each other progress. It was ultimately scrapped because Nintendo couldn't get the feature to work to their satisfaction. Thankfully, future games in the Mario series did manage to get co-op involved in very creative ways, most recently players being able to control Cappy in Super Mario Odyssey. Number 4. The 8 scrapped Colossi. Shadow of the Colossus. Shadow of the Colossus' gameplay consists entirely of the player battling 16 towering colossi, but Fumito Ueda's original ambitious idea was to have the player battle a staggering 48 colossi. Ueda eventually halved this to a more sensible 24, though a further 8 were eventually cut from the final game despite reportedly being fully implemented during development. These 8 excised colossi included a huge flaming phoenix which had to be lured into a nearby lake, a monkey, a giant worm, and most terrifyingly of all, a massive spider. Many of these bosses were cut due to their similarities to existing colossi, with Ueda not wishing to repeat himself, but considering that the AI routines and gameplay mechanics were apparently completed, it's a damn shame that they weren't included in the recent remake. Number 3. Playable Lamar. Grand Theft Auto 5. Grand Theft Auto 5's final story mission gives you 3 options. You can either kill Michael, kill Trevor, or pick the Death Wish option, in which Michael, Trevor, and Franklin murder the hell out of any enemies they have left. But that third option was initially going to end with the death of Franklin, after which his space on the character wheel would be replaced by his good pal Lamar, making him playable for the entire post-game. This was confirmed by Slink Johnson, the voice actor for Lamar, who stated that Rockstar ultimately opted not to kill Franklin due to Johnson's own unavailability to provide more voiceover for Lamar, as a result of personal issues that he was going through during production. While on one hand Franklin probably is the most deservable of a death, Lamar is just so damn likeable that I very much doubt that anyone would have had a problem with him taking Franklin's place. Number 2. Create your own bonfire. Dark Souls 3. Above all else, Dark Souls games are renowned for their incredible difficulty, so there is nothing greater than seeing a bonfire ahead in the distance serving as a checkpoint for players to rest up and prep for the next mission. The placement of these bonfires is crucially to maintain a balanced difficulty, but during development of Dark Souls 3, From Software originally planned to allow players to create their own bespoke bonfires. A player who dug into an alpha copy of the game found that they could sacrifice certain enemies to create bonfires, allowing players to decide for themselves when they needed to take a breather. It's easy to see why Souls purists probably weren't a fan of the idea, but it would have made the game a tad more accessible and less intimidating to newcomers. Number 1. Game Boy camera functionality. Perfect Dark. Here's a game that made it so far into development that it was actually announced in E3 1999, a whole year before Perfect Dark even came out. Rare's follow-up to GoldenEye 007 is similarly one of the N64's most acclaimed games, again owing largely to its fantastically designed and executed multiplayer mode. The announced feature that didn't make the cut was compatibility with a Game Boy camera, which was intended to allow players to take a photograph of their face and map it onto a multiplayer character in the game. Nintendo originally stated that it was cut due to technical limitations, yet it was later revealed to be a reaction to the fallout surrounding the April 1999 Columbine High School massacre, where concerns were raised about players being able to shoot avatars of actual human beings. Nevertheless, this would have made an incredible multiplayer shooter even better, being able to import all of your pals into the game and then start blasting away. And that's our list. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, click that subscribe button. But for now, I have been Kirsten Ria, and I'll see you in the next video.